I'd like to welcome all of you to this conversation about forgiveness. My name is Karen Rivers, and I am co-founder of the Sophia Foundation, and I have been called to create an initiative about the way of forgiveness. And today's conversation will introduce that and also give some information about the issues around forgiveness that all of us as human beings face, both in our personal lives and in our community life and national life, and in our experience as citizens of this world.
My name is Summer Sobin, and I am a co-founder of the Church of the Sacred Light of the Heart, which is based here in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And part of our spiritual mission is the awakening of the Christ impulse, and also the healing of the individual and on the collective level. So when Karen and I were discussing the early seeds of the power of forgiveness, it resonates very deeply on many levels. And our community has a profound dedication being rooted in the South and the history of the South, with slavery in particular. So we are working to bridge with other communities to bring about acknowledgement of the past of what's happened here with people who've been enslaved, as well as bearing witness to these stories and bringing healing forward to the land that we live on today, and hope to educate so that we can move forward as humanity.
My name is Stephen Lambeth. I've been a student of Karen's for several years now. Also serve on the board of trustees for the Sophia Foundation as the secretary. And I'm just happy to be here with both of you and to be having this conversation on such an important topic. So I think maybe we can start with just the basics. What even is forgiveness? And how would you respond to that, Karen?
Well, forgiveness is actually a very complex and sensitive issue. We all have experiences in our lives where we have been wronged or hurt, and we have an inner process that we experience in response to that. And when we are actually able to transform the suffering that arises from a misdeed into compassion and love and joy because of the growth that's occurred within us, and when we have actually made a commitment to the person who has offended us, to release them from all obligation for any restitution, we come to have an understanding of forgiveness. And I'd like to say that it's very complex dealing with the emotional level of forgiveness, dealing with the thoughts in our mind of the purpose and incentive behind a person mistreating us in one way or another, or harming one of our loved ones, and then being able to transform that and bring it into an act of true release, regardless of any change in the other person. And there's much to be said about many stages that one will pass through before reaching the state of complete forgiveness. But as an overview, that gives an introduction.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Karen, I'm wondering if you could speak to how the process of forgiveness is lived into. How do we endeavor to carry that through our lives and embody it?
Well, forgiveness is actually an aspect of love. And love is the founding principle upon which all of creation has arisen. So, on a fundamental level, forgiveness requires connecting in to the divine impulse of love and allowing any obstacle that's in our way of feeling that love to dissipate. We have to be able to remove any obstacle of pain, resentment, anger, a need for restitution or apology. And so in order to do that, we have to honor ourselves. We have to honor the true feelings that are arising within us and understand that possibly we have been given an experience that has greater pain than we have been prepared to handle. And what is called forth then is the need for an inner growth process where we can absorb and transmute the experience that we've had into something that becomes constructive and healing. There's actually a beautiful passage that I'd like to read to you because it has a very poignant description. This is from Stephen Levine, from a book that he wrote called Bringer of Enactment. Overcome any bitterness that may have come because you were not up to the magnitude of pain that was entrusted to you. Like the mother of the world, who carries the pain of the world in her heart, each of us is part of her heart and is therefore endowed with a certain measure of cosmic pain. You are sharing in the totality of that pain. You are called upon to meet it in joy instead of self-pity. The secret: open your heart as a vehicle to transform cosmic suffering into joy. Now, in terms of your question, this gives a theory, but it doesn't really give the steps that are required on an inward basis. And those steps are several. I just gave a workshop last weekend that was for about 6 hours that went through a process. But as a brief overview, one has to deal with the feeling life first, because that's where an event actually strikes and activates our feelings. And it's a process to work through them. And one of the things that we hope to do with the Way of Forgiveness project is to help people learn how to hold space to support people in going through this emotional transformation of feeling the impact of an action against them and the steps that are required to bring it to a feeling of love and compassion for the other. Also, we have to understand that the impact on our feeling life has a resonance and relationship to our vitality, to our etheric body. And so we have a responsibility to work with our etheric energy to help heal, because otherwise depression and a certain weightiness occurs when we're bearing the suffering of being hurt by a loved one or by a stranger. And when one can actually come to an inner place of understanding, not only of the circumstance as a whole, but also how it might be that we have participated in creating that dynamic to occur, then we can go through a process inwardly of forgiving ourselves and resolving to change a certain aspect of ourself, not to attract that dynamic again. And that's when we get close to readiness to be able to forgive another, because we know that we've understood something about ourselves that will help prevent a recurrence of this situation. So as you can see there, this is just a brief introduction, but these are some of the steps that are required in a process of coming to be able to actually state wholeheartedly from the core of our being that I am willing to release you from any responsibility to be punished, of any debt you owe me. I leave you in freedom so that there's no further karmic responsibility to correct what has happened. That's what forgiveness is.
It's so big, right?
Yeah.
I think like growing up, we just learn, oh, well, you say I'm sorry, and then they say I forgive you, and it's a wash, you know?
Yes.
And what I love about this is that it's really getting to the heart of the actual work involved, the inner work, to forgive. And the way that that work is part of an evolutionary process. And I'm curious if you could speak to just the way forgiveness is playing into that evolutionary process and helping to manifest the rose of the world.
It's a great question. So, forgiveness, as I said earlier, is one aspect of love. And our evolutionary task is to become beings of divine love. That in everything we do and everything we say and everything we think is inspired and growing out of the root of love. And to forgive another and to be able to do that and leave them in freedom is a step and a deed. It's actually a deed. Forgiveness isn't a feeling, it's a deed that is serving the evolution of humanity. And it's every time we're truly able to forgive, we're releasing spiritual beings from having to do the work of setting up the karmic recompense for our actions so that they can take on greater work. So we are working as agents of Christ and as agents of Sophia. Forgiveness is a Sophianic deed, and the rose of the world is an age that is coming toward us from the future that will bear a Sophianic culture, a culture of love and wisdom in the world. The Sophia Foundation is founded to help create a culture of love and wisdom. And so our task and the inspiration that is really living strongly in me to bring forward this initiative on the way of forgiveness is to help bring forward a culture of love and wisdom. It's known, and from sacred texts back as far as ancient India, we have in the Mahabbarata a statement that it is forgiveness upon which the world is able to continue to exist. That if there wasn't forgiveness, there would be so much poison in the world, in the atmosphere, that we wouldn't be able to live. And so to bring this healing, transformative process, taking the pain and misdeeds of the past and transforming them, it's like creating compost that will nurture a new garden and bring forth a new age where human beings will be sensitive and compassionate and able to process and heal things quickly.
Wow. Wow. Such a compelling vision. And you've mentioned several times, both of you, the way of forgiveness, this new project that you all are holding together, and I wonder if either of you would like to share more about that.
Sona, why don't you say something first?
Sure. I will speak from my own experience of witnessing life and living life, is that there's not one human being who hasn't had to forgive. And I was sharing with Karen, I asked my 8-year-old daughter, what does forgiveness mean to her? And she said, well, if you don't forgive, Mom, you won't have any friends. And I was very moved by that, because inherently we realize that in order to survive and continue living, we're constantly having to be in this state of open-heartedness. And it truly is, for me, also a spiritual force. Forgiveness is something that we can consciously call in. And my vision within the project of the way of forgiveness is to see the birthing of a ceremonial space that is universal and for all religious backgrounds, all traditions, all ages, to be able to come together and do some of the feeling into that realm of the individual work that needs to be done in a collective way that is calling in this force of forgiveness. In a way, I feel like our culture has lost a lot of the power of ceremony, and we are so hungry for it. And it can look, right, in many diverse ways. And something about not being so literal in the mind and really creating a space of getting in the heart together, where we forgive ourselves as much as forgiving another. And it really, forgiveness hits me on multi-layer, first with self, because when we really begin to awaken, we have to reflect on all of the misdeeds and all of the way that the small self has acted. And that is a pretty intense process to allow in. And then we look at our relationships, whether there are obvious examples of how we need to bring forth forgiveness, and usually that is a process. It's not an instant, as you're saying. It is something that we develop the maturity to live into and work with, and allow for the grace of it to come in and the time that it takes for it to come in, and not be a victim is another key piece. Can we flip it and see the whole world as the benevolent mother inviting us to awaken and to heal? And then finally, thinking about forgiveness on the collective level, I would love to raise a banner for that conversation, because obviously when we look at the state of the world today, it causes a lot of anguish and pain on a daily level. And we are all somehow complicit. We really are. And so taking deep ownership into that and really allowing our hearts to break is going to take a lot of strength to forgive ourselves so that we can move forward. And I think of my young children and all the children and all the generations to come. And this feels like a necessary conversation right now. And I'm delighted to be part of that with you.
Yeah, I feel that it's the only way forward. I feel so strongly about this, and that's what's inspired me to take this step, because it's clear that it first came to me in pondering the situation in the Middle East and the divisiveness and conflict that's been going on for thousands of years now. And there's only one way out. There's only one way to stop the wars in the Middle East, and that is through forgiveness. It is the healing agent. And it's true in relationships that are filled with hatred or anger or judgment and antagonism toward another because of misdeeds that have been done. And it's the only way out that we can come to this. And it must be a learned experience of how to come to true forgiveness in our souls and to bring this into the world. And if any of you are interested in participating in this, we would welcome your presence.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having these conversations, for opening the door to this project, the Way of Forgiveness, and for bringing this work more fully into the world, because it's so clear how needed it is in times like these.
And I'd like to thank all of you who have watched this conversation and hope that you'll take it to heart. And if you're inspired in any way to connect with this or to learn more about it, please feel free to contact me or Summer, if you know how to get hold of Summer. And you can always get hold of her through me and through Kim and the Sophia Foundation. And there are many different ways one can participate. One is just through taking up the personal process of cleansing one's heart and releasing any obstacle that is blocking your way toward having divine love flow through you continuously and not holding any pain in regards to another. There's also the possibility of becoming part of the Way of Forgiveness and learning the process of creating the sacred space for ceremony around forgiveness to support others in that process. And there's also the possibility of working educationally with people in terms of how one can go about developing the process and the skill, the inner ability to become a forgiving person. And then there's also the possibility that Summer was discussing about taking up an initiative regarding a cultural issue. For instance, like what has taken place in this past week, it's hard to fathom with the attack on the Jewish people in the synagogue in Philadelphia and the bombs that were mailed to various past presidents and political figures, and the attack on the African American church where the doors were locked, and so the aggressor went into a grocery store and shot 2 people. You know, these events are cultural crises, and if one feels called to help bring an initiative of forgiveness for past deeds, current events, and helping to educate people toward healing for the future, that's another opportunity. So we want to thank you all for taking the time to listen to this conversation and hope to hear from you if you feel interested.